The irony was I was making more money than I ever had before. I was young. I was in the best shape of my life, like cover model, Men's Health magazine type of shape. Everything was going my way.
Welcome back, everybody, to From Crisis to Justice, the show where we help entrepreneurs turn crisis and chaos into clarity and help business owners protect their legacies and protect themselves legally, mentally, and financially. Today's guest is a powerhouse and a friend, Craig Ballantyne. He is the best-selling author of The Perfect Day Formula and coach to some of the world's top 7 to 9 figure founders. He's coached people like Bedros Keuilian and Jason Capital, and founders such as Russell Brunson have also successfully used Craig's systems to multiply the revenue in their businesses. Craig is known as the world's most disciplined man, but his success didn't come without setbacks. In fact, he's faced anxiety, burnout, and business stress that most people never talk about. So I want to dive in and talk more about that. Craig, thank you so much for joining me today.
Man, this is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Always a good time hanging with you. So tell us a little bit about how you got into business coaching in the first place.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I'm a farm boy from Canada, and I ended up building an online fitness business of all things. So I sold my first product online in January 28th, 2001. I sold a Word document through PayPal, and that set me off on the course of building this turbulence training fitness program for the next 15 years. Along the way, people started saying, wow, you get so much done. You are very productive. Therefore, you must be the world's most disciplined man. That's where that whole little shtick came from. And I don't claim to be like David Goggins, running ultra marathons every single day or anything like that. But I use systems to go from being kind of lazy and unmotivated, as many people naturally are, to becoming very productive because I wanted to achieve more. And I built systems. Systems are the keystone of discipline. And then from there, because people started asking me how I got this all done and how I grew my businesses, I had my first business coaching event in 2007 of, way back then. And it was mostly in the fitness world. And then over the years, every single year, it'd be like a supplement guy, then a construction company owner, and then, a lawyer like Parag would come into my world. And, we had all types of entrepreneurs, and we've worked with people in the strangest industries. And today we coach, I would say low 7-figure to mid 8-figure entrepreneurs and business owners to get more systems in their business and in their personal lives so they become more organized and increase their profits.
Yeah, I love that. And so what do you think holds most of these entrepreneurs back? For example, if it's low 7 figures, what's holding them back from mid to high 7 figures or even 8 figures? I mean, what's the constant you've seen, and or does it differ between 7 figures and 8 figures, meaning the blocks that people have at 7 figures change when they get to 8 figures?
Yeah, I mean, the nuance is a little bit different, but ultimately it's the inability to say no. And this is from the person who just started their side hustle yesterday to the person who's doing 8 figures, 9 figures, even billionaires. The thing is as you get more successful, you get asked to do more things, whether it's donate to charities, whether it's be involved in charity events, whether it is mentor people, or is it, to go on podcasts, be on YouTube, go on TV. Just think of how many times people, and I'm saying this to the people listening today, as an entrepreneur, how many times do you get asked to do something, to try out a new program? People are pitching you all the time. You're seeing stuff and you're thinking, oh, maybe I should try that. You've got books that everybody's recommending, even mine, and you have all of these choices. And the people that struggle to go to the next level get spinning their wheels because they say yes to too many things. And oftentimes, and that's why I wrote The Dark Side of Discipline, is that we're not saying yes to binge drinking, and we're not saying yes to a bag of potato chips and 19 episodes of Netflix every night or video game marathons. What we're saying yes to are good things, but the good is getting in the way of the great. And the good things can be anything from, joining a fitness challenge, doing 100 push-ups in 100 days. That's a push-up or a fitness challenge that always, gets me fired up, and because I think it's so useless. Or it is, starting everybody's doing an online challenge now for their business, or writing a book, or starting a podcast, or doing a YouTube channel. All of these things, they're good, right? Like exercising is good. Starting a YouTube channel, it's good. But if it gets in the way of great, which is, ultimately growing your business, working on the constraints and bottlenecks in your business, having the difficult discussions with your business partner, or improving your marriage, or fixing your health if it's really out of control. If you're doing good that gets in the way of the great, then the good becomes destructive. At the very least, it's a perverse form of procrastination. And so that's what I see, because, you and I, and everybody listening, we're ambitious, we're high energy, we want to have it all, do it all, be it all, travel everywhere. But eventually you have to say no, because if you want to do great things, you have to do fewer things.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I love about your philosophy. You and I have been each other's clients. I was a coaching client with you, and you've
definitely helped me out with quite a few important things.
I appreciate that. And it was my privilege and pleasure. So, one of the things that I think is difficult, meaning it's easy to think about in kind of a vacuum, but it's very hard to do on a day-to-day basis when you're trying to grow and scale a business, is these various opportunities come about. And so, part of you, or at least maybe a part of me, always wants to kind of say no to almost everything. But then there's the other part of me that says, hey, look, if you say no to this, then it may leave doors closed that you don't even know about. So it's much easier to say no to something if you've already been there and done that. But it gets much harder as you continue to scale up and these opportunities come your way to be able to say no, because you really don't know what's behind that door. And there's an innate level of curiosity about opening that door to find out what other doors it leads to. So what would you tell entrepreneurs in terms of how to say yes to things and how to say no to things? Meaning, how do you decide what to say yes to and how to say no to if you haven't been there and you haven't done that?
Right. It's a good question. Like what role does serendipity play in this? I'm going to be pretty hardcore on this. And I'm going to say that a lot of the, you never know what's going to happen. You never know what's going to come out of this meeting. It's a lottery ticket. It's a lottery ticket networking. It's a lottery ticket marketing. Oh, I should go and try this thing. You never know what will happen. I need to go to this event. You never know who I will meet. You can't live your life like that. You're not literally, you're figuratively scratching a lottery ticket, hoping that you're going to go to this thing and you're going to bump into somebody who's going to make you an easy $1 million. That's not how it works. And in most cases, in advance, because you have experienced similar events or coffee meetings or whatever, how it's going to end up. But we like to believe, because actually going and doing that thing is easier than us working on the hard problem in our business. And so I want people to put aside the lottery ticket approach to networking or marketing and stick to their circle of competence. And so that's a phrase from Warren Buffett. And Warren Buffett, one of the greatest investors, maybe the greatest investor ever. And what he did was he said that he stuck to his circle of competence. So if anybody knows anything about Warren Buffett, he was famous for being ridiculed in the late 90s because he didn't buy any tech stocks. But that was outside Warren's circle of competence. Now, he may have chosen the right ones, but a lot of people got burned by the tech stocks in 2000, 2001 when the market turned. And Warren just didn't want to make mistakes. Him and his partner, Charlie Munger, were famous for just trying to avoid being stupid. That was their entire investment philosophy. It was just wait patiently, sit on your hands until something so obvious comes your way that it's going to be a grand slam, like investing in Coke in the 80s, like Warren did. And so we know, because we have experience in life, we know whether or not, and we can judge fairly objectively, whether or not going to XYZ event or having a meeting with ABC person is going to be worth it or not. And we have to harshly judge those situations. And 1 out of 1,000 times you might be wrong, but 999 times you're going to be right. And when you go and do one of those things, it steals your time, energy, and focus from either something that you should be working on in the business or from something that you should be working on in your personal life. Because almost every single person that's listening to this would love to have more time. And if you ruthlessly look at how you're spending your time right now, you can have more time. It's just that we're giving it away to too many things.
Yeah, that's right. And it's interesting. You talk about Warren Buffett on the one hand, a billionaire, and talking about a few other billionaires is the late Steve Jobs and Jeff Bezos. So it's interesting because you may have heard this, that those guys talk about the importance of wandering to a certain extent and the importance of space and time. So do you think that, well, the importance of space and time for the purposes of finding your path or finding your way and becoming successful, which to some extent may oppose the ideas of what other billionaires say. And
Well, I
so,
mean, yeah. So listen, Steve Jobs is also famous for a quote that says, I'm as proud of what we didn't do as what we did do. So, you can probably, much like I'm from the nutrition and fitness industry, like you can find a study that says cow's milk is the worst thing in the world. And you can find a study that says cow's milk is the best thing in the world. It fits your bias, right? And so we can find these quotes from the billionaires and I'm guilty of this too. I go find a story that supports my bias here, and we can quote those guys. So it's fair, that, Steve Jobs went to India, did all some acid and whatever, and came back and all of a sudden invented the iPhone. That's the kind of how the narrative goes. But he was also ridiculously focused in that after they did the iPod, he probably knew we were going to the iPhone, but he didn't rush to it. And he knew he would do the iWatch, but he didn't do the iWatch in 2008. I don't know when he did it, but eventually he did it. And he didn't do an iCar, even though I'm sure plenty of people would say, hey, let's do an iCar and all that sort of stuff. You have to, within your circle of competence, judge on this. Otherwise, if you take every coffee request and you go to every event, there's no time for you to exercise. There's no time for you to spend time with your family. And so we have to draw the line in there and have these boundaries. And again, will you miss something by not going to India and doing acid? I suppose maybe your business will get better if you followed Steve Jobs' path. I don't know, and wandered around the world that way. But I don't think that Steve Jobs wouldn't have been successful if he didn't do that. Remember, what really, there was some timing, right, in this. Like Steve Jobs became passionately interested in the computer in the earliest days of computing. And, if the computer had, if Steve Jobs was born 30 years earlier or 30 years later, what would have become of Steve Jobs? Like there was some timing in it. Same with me. I was born and went to college the year that people started getting email addresses. And I was introverted by nature and I liked writing. And when I found that I could make money sitting behind a computer and not interacting with human beings, I won the lottery. Now, if I was born 30 years earlier, I would have had to have figured out how to place ads in a newspaper or the back of a classified ad and make money that way if I wanted to do a similar business. So, there's so many factors that go in here. And most important for our listeners is eventually you got to draw the line and you have to make a decision on, like, just like when you have two good candidates, you have to choose one person for the job. You have two good opportunities to choose a CRM. You got to choose one of them. And hopefully you make the right decision on all the things. And it goes for the same with the opportunities and the serendipity in life.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think, that kind of is the unfair thing about following the advice of some of these billionaires, is because
cherry picking.
Steve Jobs was probably going to be Steve Jobs regardless. I was talking to a friend about this, like the whole idea of it probably didn't matter who Muhammad Ali's trainer was because Muhammad Ali was still going to be Muhammad Ali.
That's probably,
and he's probably going to be great regardless because of the sheer amount of raw talent that he had. And so somebody could polish it a little bit, but ultimately it's not like the trainer made Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali made Muhammad Ali.
Well, then you can argue with Mike Tyson and say, look what happened to when the trainer passed away and was gone from Mike's life. And maybe Muhammad Ali would have been fine, but Mike just, went on a down curve because, he didn't have the father figure. And I forget what the guy's name was, Gus or D'Amato or whatever.
Cuz D'Amato, yes.
Yeah, and it was like, but I think he passed away. And then, Mike went from being basically the Tiger Woods of boxing, and he had his self-destructing moment and went down. So yeah, it's like, we can just argue these things all the time. And, but some people certainly are meant for greatness, and who knows what would happen if things turned out slightly different.
Yeah. And, so the point of that though is really just I think that there's that fire of each person that
Sure.
they're looking for a certain thing, and so when they're looking
Well,
for it,
yeah,
those dots line up and they find it.
and the big lesson I take from my anxiety attacks that I had. So years ago, before I started business coaching, I had an anxiety attacks, sent me to the emergency room twice. And when I had them, they were bad. I was like, I'll do anything to get rid of these things. They were almost literally crippling. I couldn't really concentrate on anything. It went on for 6 weeks straight, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It felt like I was having a heart attack. And what got me through it was I committed to turning over every rock, which meant I went to do Qigong, Tai Chi, yoga, breath work, meditation. I didn't like any of those things, but I knew that I had to try those things because somewhere in there was the solution. But the key words are turned over every rock. And if somebody is ambitious, high energy, wants more, it's not the person that you're going to meet. You would eventually meet the person that you meet that you think, oh man, if I didn't meet this person, who knows? Well, you just would have met another person. You wouldn't have met a person because the core values, the intrinsic characteristics of you would have met somebody who showed you the way. And, I often hear this from my clients, like, man, I met you and you showed me the path. I'm like, I'm not the only person who could have showed you the path. I mean, I appreciate it and it makes me feel good. But the truth is that if you didn't find me, you may have found somebody who sucked. That's fair. And you may have found somebody who was okay. But eventually you would have found somebody who was as good as me or better to show you the path because you're the type of person who doesn't give up. So it's not me. The success is you. And, I just showed you a path. You were just wandering around kind of aimless in the dark, but the path existed, and I was the person to guide you towards it. So I think that you're right, that the intrinsic characteristics, there's natural talent, and then there is, passion and, preparation and those mental characteristics. Everybody's eventually probably going to get somewhere darn close, regardless of who they meet.
Yeah, and what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about the anxiety attacks going back, because I think, a lot of people see the successful Craig Ballantyne today, multimillionaire, multiple seven-figure businesses, business coach, to already relatively successful, or no, not even relatively successful entrepreneurs. And so there's the current Craig. And so if we rewind that back, let's talk a little bit about old Craig, the Craig that had maybe an alcohol problem or an addiction,
Sure.
who is not as confident, not the guy who talks on stages, not the guy who's the coach of coaches and helps business owners scale. Like, let's talk a little bit about that moment, and then how did you get out of that? I mean, that's a deep, dark place, and especially because I think from the outside looking in, it seemed like you had good stats, right? You were healthy, you were working out, had a six-pack.
Yeah, totally, man.
And so can you tell us a little bit about that, how you got out of it, and how you figured it out, and what you might do differently today if you had to do it over again?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's true. The irony was I was making more money than I ever had before. I was young. I was in the best shape of my life, like cover model, Men's Health magazine type of shape. Everything was going my way. And the only problem was not the only problem. There was two big problems, I think, is that one, I was a hypocritical binge drinker on Saturdays, and I was a good boy from Sunday through Friday as a personal trainer, telling people what to do. But that hypocrisy in my life definitely led to some stress. And then the exhaustion, when I had my first anxiety attack, it was around the holidays. I was, training people early in the morning. I was drinking some nights, staying out late. And, I was just exhausted, on New Year's Eve, and I still went out and drank more. And then the next morning I woke up, and that entire day I had the anxiety attack. The other thing that I was messing up was that my introverted tendencies caused me and supported me keeping everything inside. So, any problems, I hid them. I didn't do journaling. I didn't do all those breathing therapies, Qigong, yoga, meditation, Tai Chi, all that sort of stuff. I wasn't highly caffeinated, but if I was, that would have been a contributing factor to it. And I was just living out of alignment. And that, you use the little metaphor of, if you ever try and cram a whole bunch of stuff into something that has any elasticity to it, you cram, and the harder you cram down, the greater the reaction, right? It's going to explode up in your face. And that's what I was doing with thoughts and feelings and problems, was I was cramming them down, and eventually exploded into that anxiety. Now, I quit drinking for a short time after. And then after a few weeks, when I started feeling better, it came back in because I wasn't committed to getting rid of it from my life. And then sure enough, I had another exhausting spell and had another anxiety attack. And then that's the one that lasted for 6 weeks. And through that, I was smart enough to ask for help. I was smart enough to realize, like, okay, all these people who do yoga and meditation, they're pretty chill, and that's supposed to help. So I asked people who did those types of things, and I got instructors. And again, I did not like any of it, but I was committed to it. I was like, I'm not taking a pill for this. Like, I'm not doing any drugs to get rid of anxiety. That's just going to be a Band-Aid solution. So I made sure that everything was, a natural approach. And after a few weeks and another anxiety attack, I was able to get rid of it. I also went to the doctor, went to the emergency room. They gave me a heart rate monitor. And when they told me that there was nothing physically wrong with me, my brain kind of switched. And that was a huge change moment for me. And I actually read a book at the same time called Panic Away. I found an ebook on the internet and it was 2006. And I read through to the first 5 words of chapter 2. And then I was cured. And the first 5 words of chapter 2 said, "There's nothing wrong with you." And that was it. It was like, oh yeah, there's nothing wrong with me. And then I said to myself, I'm too busy for this anyways. And I got, fortunately I was able to, it came back a little bit, but I had all these tools in my toolbox to get rid of it. Again, and now today, nothing could give me anxiety. So I say all of this, and I do look back and I laugh at anxiety. I think that anxiety is self-inflicted. I don't talk about depression. I don't think that depression is a laughing matter, but I think if you have anxiety once, I feel bad for you. If you have anxiety twice, shame on you. Like, you're just living in the wrong way, and you need to go out and get the tools and tool set, because it is nothing more than worrying about things that haven't happened. And so, you just can't waste your time and energy on that. And you can't definitely waste your life, going from anxiety issue to anxiety issue. Like, you need to go and work on this, but it's like losing 30 pounds. Anybody can lose 30 pounds. It's going to suck. It's going to be hard, but you can get rid of 30 pounds just like you can get rid of anxiety. So I don't have any respect for it now today, because I've built the tools to do it. So it was a painful moment. There were definitely some, close to lowest moments in my life, but everything is a learnable skill, including overcoming anxiety.
Yeah. And, it's one of the many things I admire a lot about you is your ability to continue learning through the process and almost be willing to start at zero again and look at things objectively of where you are to be able to restack and get rid of bad habits. How did you develop that skill?
So I started, so what I have is these effortless discipline systems, and, they're what help me be productive, but they're also what help me get rid of bad habits. And it's very simple. And you can get rid of any bad habit, whether you're addicted to your phone, whether you're addicted to pornography, whether you drink too much. I wouldn't say if you're addicted to alcohol or if you have a drug addiction. Those are like beyond the scope of the book. But if you just have bad habits you want to kick, it just requires elimination, preparation, and connection. That's it. It's 3 things, and it works for everything. And so the elimination is pretty obvious. Like, when I was a binge drinker and I wanted to get rid of alcohol in my life, it was, first of all, get it out of the house. So if it's not in the house, it's harder to get to. Eliminate myself from going to toxic environments. So a lot of my drinking involved sporting events. So I'd stop going to sporting events. Now, I can go to sporting events today, but back then I had to go to the extreme measure of not going to sporting events and putting myself in an environment where alcohol was freely available. And then I had to eliminate the toxic people in my life whose only purpose in my life was to drag me down to drinking. However, there were some good people that I associated drinking with, and I didn't want to remove them from my life. And I'm not a fan of these social media posts that says, cut out everybody for your life for the next 6 months and go dark. I think that's absolutely stupid. Humans are meant to be very social, and there's so much benefit to other people. And so what I did was I was like, I got my best friend of 30 years. He drinks a lot, but I really want to hang around him. I'm not going to cut him out of my life. But we had mutual interests in non-drinking activities. So we would plan and prepare to meet on Saturday morning, go for a big hike. And then in the afternoon, he would go to the sporting event or the bachelor party. And I would say, no, I can't go to that. It's not going to be a good fit for me at this stage of my life. I'll get back to those later on when I've conquered the drinking thing. And so that's the elimination part. If you have any bad habit, if you're addicted to your phone, you need to put as much friction as possible in place of you using your phone in the wrong environment, such as around your kids. And we teach people to download something called the Opal app, OPAL. It has 4 million downloads, a 4.8 star review on the App Store. And you can set your phone up using the Opal app to block you from accessing social media, accessing your text, accessing your phone, accessing your email, whatever it is that is your downfall, and within certain time ranges. So if you want to be present with your family from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m., you use the Opal app on your phone. And even if you pick it up and you try and do something, you can't do anything. So you won't even bother picking it up after a while. And that's the type of building a fence around yourself is what you want to do. Just like, I grew up on a farm. We built fences, not only to keep the cattle in, but to keep the other animals out. And that's what you want to do is you want to keep the distractions from coming into your life. Now, on the flip side, we have that better planning and preparation. Like I said, I had friends that I didn't want to cut out, and I wanted to spend time with them. So it took more planning and preparation to spend time with them in a positive environment. Likewise, if somebody wants to take up exercise and they've always struggled to do so, it's because there's too much friction in the way of you doing the habit. So what you need to do is set your exercise clothes beside the bed, have your shoes right there, have your workout printed out, or have a workout video you're going to watch, or even better, that you're going to go to a local workout place where there's a community aspect. It's a class of like-minded people who are going to lift you up, because that's a third phase, which is connection, and also known as accountability. You need to be connected with people who are achieving the same goals as you, who are positive, who are going to support you, who are not going to drag you down, and who are going to hold you accountable to following through. And when you have that, whether you have accountability to one person that you deeply do not want to disappoint, which has been a life changer for me, or whether you have accountability to a community, a group of people where you stand up and say, I'm going to achieve this in the next 30 days, and I want you to hold me accountable to it. If you're a person of integrity, you're going to follow through because you don't want to be a hypocrite. That's like a really low feeling. So your brain will support you in the habit change you need to follow through on getting rid of the bad behavior or adding the good behavior to your life. And it's just elimination, preparation, and connection for any bad habit that you want to get rid of and any good habit you want to add to your life.
That's great. And so, with your new book, The Dark Side of Discipline, you kind of take that concept, but it seems like maybe the idea of discipline also has, as the name and title of the book implies, a dark side to it, and it can get too restrictive. So can you talk a little bit about that and how one decides? Meaning, is it good discipline or is it bad discipline?
Yeah. So the whole reason I wrote the book is because in this day and age, what people do is every day they wake up and they open up their social media, and especially if they use Instagram, they go to the Explore page and it shows what's trending and viral. And they see somebody doing a cold plunge and somebody doing an ultra marathon and somebody's reading a book a week and somebody's over here doing some other workout challenge that you do twice a day. And then another guy's doing 100 push-ups in 100 days. And if you're a reactive person, you're like, I got to go do this. Like, it's just like in our human nature to be lemmings and do things and follow the crowd. But the problem is, individually, none of those things is a bad thing, right? Like doing push-ups, it's a good thing. Exercising, good thing. Reading a book a week, good thing. But if reading a book a week stops you from writing the book that you've wanted to write for the last 10 years, then that good thing getting in the way of the great thing becomes a bad thing. And I've seen this go so far where I've had friends, successful entrepreneurs, six-pack abs, married to a wonderful woman, kids, awesome family, like ideal, perfect life, beautiful home. And then they saw a discipline challenge on their phone. And they decided to spend 2 or 3 hours a day for months in a row devoting themselves to this discipline challenge when they were already disciplined. They were already successful, already productive. Like, what were they trying to prove? And I knew they were already busy. They had a family and they had a business that kept them busy 8, 9, 10, 11 hours a day. So where was this 3 hours coming from? I noticed your business is still growing. So you're not taking it from the business. It meant they were taking it from their family. And sure enough, after they finished the discipline challenge, not once, but twice, they did this to get internet claps on the back. Their wife walked out on them with the kids. And now they went from being able to see their kids all the time to once every 2 weeks. Broke my heart. And that's the dark side of discipline. Discipline can be your savior, like it did for me when I was a binge drinker. It got me out of the depths. It can be a lifeline for somebody that's really in a bad place. But then you get to a point where there's a razor thin line where you cross over and you go from having discipline serve you to discipline being your master. And it puts you in this prison of rigidity, which it did to me for a long time. I had these exercise streaks that I couldn't violate. I had to go to bed at a certain time, which meant I couldn't go and do certain things and blah, blah, blah. It's all ridiculous as I look back on it with my outside eyes and think, what a tool I was. But when you're in it, man, when you're in it and you've lost the plot, you really get carried away by, people saying, oh man, you're doing awesome. Even though you've never met the person and they're saying it on the internet and you're excluding your family at the expense, it's the expense of your family to get some positive reinforcement from somebody you've never met and never will meet. And it all sounds so crazy until you're that person and you're swept up in it. And that's the dark side of discipline, where you just go too far, where you take up the triathlon when your marriage is struggling and you avoid the difficult discussion in your marriage because you want to go and do a triathlon and you think, oh, I'm doing hard things, I'm being disciplined, but your marriage is suffering. And so, what do you win? You lose the game of life.
Yeah. And, it's really interesting in the age of social media. You see the highlight reels of other people's lives, but not just that. You see the highlight reel of the top element or the few elements of a particular person's life. Meaning, let's say we see David Goggins and he's jogging 100 miles in a day, just nonstop. And it seems very inspiring and very much built for social media. But you see that one element of his life, but you don't see the rest of it in terms of how his family life is. And I don't know. I'm not saying
I don't know either.
That's family life. But I think that it does come with a trade-off.
There's a phrase that you probably heard when you were growing up that I heard, it's keeping up with the Joneses. And years ago, what that meant was before social media is you were influenced by the people in your neighborhood. So, Johnny's family down the street, they got a new minivan. Well, now, even if your parents couldn't afford it, the pressure is on, right? Because, the station wagon in your driveway is, as it was in mine, was an old beat up station wagon, but everybody else had the minivan. And now the kids are putting the pressure on the parents, to keep up with the Joneses. And what happened when people tried to keep up with the Joneses? They outspent their income and ended up in a worse financial situation. Today's version of keeping up with the Joneses is we are starved for time, but everybody else is out there and it looks like everybody's doing these things. And we see everybody doing these things and like, I got to go and do this. And I have to spend more of my time, of which I'm already broke on time because I'm already too busy. I'm already broke on time and I have to go and spend more time on these things. And it becomes the keeping up with the Joneses. And it's gotten so ridiculous. It used to be that if you did a marathon, people would be like, man, that's pretty awesome. Now everybody's done a marathon. And if you haven't done an ultra marathon, are you even running, right? And if you haven't done the bad water marathon, which is a 100-mile marathon in the desert, are you even an ultra marathoner, right? And then there's the guy who's done 7 marathons in 7 days on 7 continents. There's a guy on Instagram whose bio says that, right? And so it's this giant pissing contest on Instagram of who's more extreme. And you can't keep up. You cannot be the most disciplined, extreme person on Instagram, but people are losing the plot trying. And it's like, hey, sorry, son or daughter, I don't have time for you right now because I have to go and cold plunge. Or, and I know this sounds like, well, I'd never do that. But I've been on probably 100 podcasts now promoting the book with Navy SEALs, Special Forces guys, really successful business owners. And they're like, I'm embarrassed to say this, but years ago I was in one of these challenges and my wife said, "Hey, we're going to the beach with the kids." And I said, "I can't go. I got to do my second workout." And then my wife looked at me with like the divorce death stare. And I was like, "Okay, I'm going to the beach." Because again, you're just so wrapped up in this myopic view of you have to do these things that you lose the plot of what really matters in life. And so, I'm just asking people to step back and do the hardest thing of all, because again, people are posting on the internet that they do hard things. I take a cold shower, I do hard things. Okay, great. Whatever. If you want to do something hard, Parag, I lived in Mexico for the last couple of years. If you want to do something hard, do what the guy, I lived in this area where there was construction all day long. And I guess it would be, I'm doing the Celsius to Fahrenheit conversion. It'd be like 85 to 90 degree, equator sun on you all day long, 90% humidity. And these guys worked wearing jeans and sweatshirts. I don't know why they wore jeans and sweatshirts, but they did all day long, building houses. There's no electricity on site. So they had to haul the cement bricks up using a rope. And they did that every single day, 6 days a week for 10 hours a day. That's a hard thing. Taking a 30-second cold shower is not a hard thing, but everybody's posting like, "Oh yeah, I just did my 30-second cold shower today. So, just to prove I can still do hard things." That's not a hard thing. But the hardest thing of all, this is my little tangent there, but the hardest thing of all for us people in the first world is to think, to take out the AirPods, to stop listening to an audiobook, to stop listening to a podcast, but not this one. Don't stop listening to this one. And to sit there in silence and figure yourself out and plot a course for your life where you achieve what matters. And then damn everybody else. Forget them. Forget them. Run your own race in life. That's the most difficult thing of all. But most people don't do it because they're so reactive that their day to day and their future is all based on what they see on their phone that morning.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think part of it is also, though, that, let's say there was a guy who's 200 pounds overweight and is broke, and he's talking about cold plunges. You're probably not going to be that inspired to do a cold plunge, from that one guy. But you see a guy who's ripped and running a very successful business, and he says, "Hey, look, the key to my success has been I do cold plunges every morning."
Sure.
And I think that some of these people may genuinely mean it, but I think others don't really. And there's an aspect of somebody looking at that, desiring whatever the outcome that person has achieved, and falsely equating the outcome the person has achieved to whatever that person is saying the habit is that they're endorsing. So, some people say, "Hey, don't buy avocado toast," or if you want to be a millionaire, don't buy avocado toast. If you ever want to own a house, don't do that.
Oh, right. Like no latte.
All this crazy stuff. So how does one cut through and find what's true for them? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. You got to know yourself. So, we have a 3-step process in the book. We talk about knowing your big why. What are you doing all of this for? And it should be a very simple statement. Like for me and my co-author, we're all about our family. Like everything we're doing is to support our family first. And so that's the filter. That's part of the filter that we run every decision through. That, I don't do any podcasts before 8 a.m. because that's the time that I spend with my kids. And, I work from 4 a.m. till 6 a.m. The kids get up. And then from 6 a.m. till 8 a.m., I spend with my kids and my wife. And then from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m., I work. But I don't do anything in from 6 a.m. till 8 a.m. I never schedule anything in there because that's the time for them. So I can make every decision through that filter. And the second thing, after you figure out your big why, is to create a vision for your life. Where do you want to get to in your life? And you've gone through my process for this. And if somebody buys the book, there's you can download a video for free about how to go and create the vision for your life, because it's so important to me, because it has worked for me. It's worked for so many of my clients to figure out their lives, to make their lives better. And when you have that, when you know exactly where you want to be in the next 3 years, where you want to be living, what you want to be achieving, what you want your family to look like, what you want your family's days and weeks to look like, what you want your family vacations to look like, what you do and what you don't do. Again, it's very easy to filter every opportunity through that. So when somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, let's go to this seminar in Vegas or this convention in Vegas, those guys are going to be there. We're going to have a great time." But your path is, your North Star is like, "Hey, I want to be happily married with 3 kids. I want to be living on the street. I want my income to be this." and somebody says, let's go to Vegas, you go immediately, that's a dangerous detour. I'm not, I run through the filter. The answer is no. And, there's not any decision fatigue from it. And then finally, the third thing that we ask people to figure out is, what's your specific definition of success for the short term, for the next 90 days, or for a specific goal that you're going for? When somebody comes to me and says they want to be more disciplined, that's a general term. I could give you a million things that would make you technically more disciplined, but it wouldn't solve your real problem. So when you say you want to be more disciplined, what specifically do you mean by that? Does that mean that you want to be in control of your phone and not use your phone when you're around your kids? Does that mean that you want to stop drinking during the week? What does it mean for you to be more disciplined? And when you get that specificity around all three of those things, your big why, your vision for your future, and your specific definition of short-term success, only then can we start to move forward with choosing which activities will get there. And if one of them is a cold plunge, if cold plunge fits into your plan, fits into your schedule, moves you ahead, and it serves you, then do it. But if you are serving the cold plunge and sacrificing what matters so that you just make sure you never miss a cold plunge and you're always on the cold plunge streak, then that's not a good idea for you. And you have to step back from it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, so let me give you a hypothetical. How
Yeah,
would you
sure.
handle this? Is this the dark side of discipline, or is this the right side of discipline? So you wake up at around 4 a.m., right? Or
Yeah.
a little bit before. I think like somewhere like 3 something, right?
Yeah, I don't use an alarm anymore. So now it's all kind of random. We got a 7-month-old. Sometimes he gets us up earlier, and sometimes I just randomly wake up and I just get out of bed, usually before 4, but sometimes I'll sleep past it. I just don't use the alarm anymore.
Yeah. So let's say, you're trying to wake up at, or let's just say somebody's trying to wake up at 4 a.m.
Yeah, sure.
and alarm goes off and they feel really tired,
Mm-hmm.
and that's normal in the beginning. But eventually your body gets used to it. But then sometimes, you'll have a night where you don't get to sleep until midnight or 1 a.m. Maybe you're traveling. Maybe you just had a late night at work. Maybe you just went out and it got a little bit late. Do you insist or encourage people to get up? Is that the dark side of discipline?
That would be in that case, because how well are you going to operate on 3 or 4 hours of sleep? Now, listen, if you have to be at the airport, for 5:30, then yeah, you're going to have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, even if you got to bed at midnight. But in most cases, you need to think in advance about the 2 or 3 most common obstacles to this. So for example, if you're like, hey, I want to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. Currently I'm getting up at 5 o'clock. I want to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I have 2 kids under the age of 2. Well, you need to be realistic. And so what happens if one of them gets up from 11 until 2 o'clock and you have to rock them back to bed? Are you going to force yourself to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go to the gym? Or are you going to say, hey, listen, this is just a stupid idea for my health and, for everybody on the road, for me to get up at that time and drive to the gym? It's a bad idea. You should change your alarm. When you go back to bed after getting your child to bed at, 1 or 2 in the morning, you should change your alarm and sleep another hour, because that's the best thing for you in the long run. No one's going to, you're not going to self-destruct if you sleep a little bit longer one night. But if you're getting to bed on time, you got to get up at the time that you promised yourself to get up. So, there's a little bit of nuance to everything, but understand that there can be certain exceptions for it. And one of the things that I'm not sure if I left this in the book. I had to cut a lot of stuff out because I wanted to keep the book to 25,000 words. And when I lived in Toronto in the wintertime, Toronto's pretty harsh winter. And every winter there'd be, 1 or 2 ice storms where it wasn't snow, it wasn't rain. And, the streets are pretty dangerous the next day. But you'd see all these runners out, and, the sensible ones stayed home. But there's actually a thing in running where it's like, if you run every day, like you have a 10,000 day running streak, and people, they're getting pats on the back from internet strangers. And every time there was an ice storm, I'd see these runners out and I'd see them wipe out, and they'd probably lose the next 3 to 6 months because they sprained an ankle, they tore a ligament, whatever, because they were so myopic about keeping the streak going. And now anybody who has half a brain would look back with outside eyes. They're not emotionally attached to the streak. They would look at that and go, that's just stupidity. I'm sorry, but you're acting stupid. And it is a stupid action. But when you are caught up in the moment and you've got so gung ho on this idea that I have to do everything every day, as I once did. I had a workout streak of 1,000 days. It was stupid. And I worked out in some weird places and I sacrificed certain social events just so I could do my workout because I had to exercise every day. But it was stupid. It was pointless. It didn't actually move me ahead. And so, you can use the classic and, is it going to matter in 5 weeks, 5 months, 5 years? If not, then don't worry about it. That's one filter that's helpful because in most cases, it probably gives you the right answer.
Yeah, I really like that. And I like the fact that, with this new book, you're really taking on a surprisingly nuanced area, which is in the hustle and grind culture. I think the part that really is overlooked is that self-care of longevity of performance rather than the performance of the one day or the 1 month or even the 1 year. A lot of the long term gets sacrificed in that. And it's only looking back on it that you realize how much you've lost. And it seems like, there's a part of your own reflection of your own life in this book. Is that
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. You can't write the book until you've lived it. And I lived discipline on both sides because, again, discipline was my savior for a while. And then discipline became my master. And I swung the pendulum too far. And I went, oh, man, that got in the way of me. And then, it was only a couple, like I stopped swinging the pendulum too far. It was a couple years later, after the pandemic started, this is where these things became really popular. And it was probably because, people were sitting around with social media, a little bit more time on their hands. They couldn't go and do certain things. So online communities became a little bit stronger. And it got them so myopic. It's like a nearsightedness. It's like blinders on that it distorted their reality. And they lost sight of what mattered to focus on what doesn't matter in the long run. And, that's what made me want to write the book.
I love it. I mean, so Craig, if people want to learn more about you or your book, how can they find you or your latest book?
Yeah, absolutely. So Amazon is the best place to do it because we want to get our Amazon sales up as high as possible. So if you go to darksideofdiscipline.com, that will redirect you to the Amazon, but also give you some extra bonuses and goodies. And then anybody can message me on LinkedIn or on Instagram. And the Instagram handle is @RealCraigBallantyne.
Awesome. Craig, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing some of your lot of wisdom that you have. Very much appreciate it.
Thank you, my man.
And to all the listeners, thank you all for joining and listening. Hope you all have gotten as much out of this as I have, or maybe even more. And if you found this helpful, make sure you like and subscribe so you know when the next episode's coming out. Thank you for joining me today on From Crisis to Justice.